You know what's interesting is that we were talking prior to this, the changes in hormones, whether they are over a 28-day period or whether they're over a life period, when estrogen comes in, she brings collagen with her. And when estrogen goes away, then there's not as much collagen. So interesting fun fact is like in the ovulation window, which is about day 11 to day 15, estrogen is at her peak. And a woman's muscles and tendons are so flexible that, like, actually, if she's doing a lot of HIIT training or plyometrics, she could actually injure herself because there's not as much stability there. So I think that's really pertinent for what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
The other thing that we've talked that I've seen a lot, and I saw it in my clinic, and then we see it in our online community, is women over 40 start to have these injuries that don't heal themselves. And that's because during perimenopause, the estrogen goes down, collagen goes down, and then we have estrogen receptor sites in every single joint. So now injuries hang around and we don't have the estrogen to be able to help in the healing process. So through that lens, that musculoskeletally, we are changing monthly and we are changing over the course of a life.
For sure.
I know your specialty is 50 and over.
Yeah.
If I could take you down to 40.
I'll do my best.
Explain from a musculoskeletal standpoint what you see in women after 40.
Yeah.
And what we can just general good musculoskeletal prevention, what can we do to support our structure so we can navigate that turbulence?
Yeah. So one of the things I think is a bit of a travesty really is that the menopause stuff is only really starting to gain more traction and more attention. Yeah. Because this is not a new problem, right? And it's something that all women will go through. It's natural. Yep. And obviously it's characterized by that loss of estrogen. Right. And as you were saying, that's such an important hormone.
Yes.
And it is very important for your muscle structure and your tendon structure.
Yes.
So as you say, these overuse or soft tissue injuries are more common as you're going through that change.
Right.
But the other thing that estrogen is really important for, it's actually an anabolic hormone. It helps with muscle growth and maintenance.
Yep.
And I know we were having a conversation just before we started recording, and you were saying it's so difficult now to maintain my muscle mass. And this is something I help people with all the time.
Amazing.
It's one of my big things, is trying to help people in their 40s, 50s and beyond to maintain muscle mass. And with that loss of estrogen, it does become more difficult.
Yeah. So my background, to give a little bit about me, I was a competitive tennis player. So I played on a tennis scholarship at the University of Kansas. We had fitness, like strength trainer coaches in the morning. We'd have to get up at 4:30 and go lift a bunch of weights. Then we had 2 practices a day, like it was in between classes.
That's a lot.
I got too bulky. Back in like my, 18, 19, 20, my muscle structure, my genetics, I would get so bulky. I didn't like it. Fast forward to 54 years old. I am like working out in the gym so hard, and I'm doing my protein loading and I'm doing tons of strength training. Yeah. And it's incredible how hard it is to build muscle. Yeah. So can you start with just helping us understand if there were some basic muscle building principles for women over 40, what would they be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 4 things that I focus on that are really important.
Amazing.
Especially for women over 40. Okay. Now the first one, and this might surprise you, don't get injured. Oh. Okay, so this has to take priority over everything else for this group. Okay. Okay. Because as we said, injuries are easier to cause because of the change. They also get worse they get more common with age in both genders. Yes. So you've got age working against you, and the actual quality of the tissue does decrease slightly as we get older. Okay. And when you're injured, it takes longer to heal. Yeah. As you said, with the women you helped, if they're peri or postmenopausal, those soft tissue injuries are going to take longer. So there's muscle strains and tendon tears. It could be twice the length of time it takes for a 20-something to get better. So a soft tissue injury can be catastrophic for your progress. Okay. So this is the vein I start with for everyone that runs through the whole thing. Yeah. Just don't get injured.
Okay, so on that, let me walk through a scenario.
Yes.
So I decided at the end of December that I was going to start doing more strength training. I hired a trainer and I was like, I'm going to go 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I told her, I'm like, I want to lift really heavy weights.
Yeah.
And at some point about 8 weeks in, I started feeling a funky shoulder thing. And then I happened to go play tennis that week and I hadn't played in a while. And that shoulder thing got a little bit harder.
Yes.
And then I kept doing my old technique of like, let me push through it.
Yeah.
And it kept getting worse and worse until I had to do nothing.
Sure.
So where along that journey, just because some people will say, well, I have aches in my joints. Does that mean I shouldn't work out? Like, what does it mean to not get injured? And at what point do we, read the body's warning signs and just say, okay, I need to rest now?
So I think we all have these problem areas in our body and we all kind of know where our problem areas are. Maybe it's a past injury that you picked up when you were younger, or maybe it's just something that, your knee just nags from time to time.
Yeah.
If you know you have that problem, one of the most important things to do is to make sure that you're trying to almost proactively manage it.
Yeah.
So that might mean paying extra attention to it in the warm-up before you start.
Okay.
And that brings me on to another important topic, is that your warm-up is incredibly important when you're going through the menopause and afterwards. Much more important than when you were in your teens and 20s.
Right. Okay.
So coming at it from the lens of a man, when I was 18 years old, I could go into the gym. I could however much weight I wanted on the bar and I could lift it and I wouldn't feel anything. Even if it was bad technique, even if I hadn't warmed up, I was fine. Fast forward to 32. I can't really do that now. I do have to have a little bit of a warm up. Otherwise, I do get an ache in my back or I do get a funky shoulder.
Right.
But it takes me about 2 or 3 minutes to warm up and then I'm good to go.
Okay.
Now, that length of time will increase with age and especially for females as well.
Okay.
So if you spent 5 minutes warming up when you're in your 30s, you're probably looking at 15 or 20.
Oh, wow.
Now. Yeah.
And what's a warm up look like?
So a myth about a warm up is that it's just to get on a treadmill and walk for 10 minutes or to get on a bike and cycle for 10 minutes. I'm afraid if we're lifting weights or if we're playing sport, it doesn't really cut it. It can help.
Right.
And it's good if you're physically cold.
Right.
So if you are, middle of winter, it's -5 outside, whatever that is in Fahrenheit for you.
Yeah.
And
we don't have winter in California. but I can.
We do here. It's still winter right now. And
right.
But if you're very, very cold, warming up the body to raise core temperature is fine. Okay. But you need to be practicing the movements you're going to be doing at speed.
Oh.
Slowly and controlled and building up to the load you're going to be using.
Okay.
So if we're talking about resistance training, and let's say you've got your funky shoulder, right?
Yeah.
And you want to go and do some bench press.
Yeah.
So what you might do is you would go in and you would take a very, very light dumbbell and just start doing some nice slow rotations to almost warm up that rotator cuff. Okay. The next thing you would do is you would go over to the bench, the exercise you're going to be doing, and practice the movement with no weight.
Okay.
Just to make sure that movement pattern is almost solidified in your brain.
Right.
So your body knows what's coming. It's starting to get ready for what you're actually about to do next.
Amazing.
Okay. Then you might put on 50% of the weight that you're going to use.
Yeah.
So very light weights. Again, just practicing that movement, but this time doing more repetitions just so you can feel that kind of warmth in the muscle.
Right.
It's warming up.
Right.
Shoulder should feel warm at this point, not painful.
Okay.
It should feel warm. Then we slowly, incrementally increase the weight, getting closer and closer to the working set, but dropping the reps.
Right.
And then when you feel ready, that's when you start your first working set.
And what's ready, though?
If you are doing the warm-up, to take you back to your question, and the pain isn't going away, it's getting worse, I would then classify that as an injury. And you probably shouldn't do that exercise until it's fixed.
Okay.
Which means it
really
needs some special attention.
Ah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't do that with my shoulder.
Sure.
I was like, the younger version of me was like, just push through it. It'll eventually heal itself. Yeah.
We all do it. And you can get away with it when you're younger. But even now in my 30s, it's like, I can't get away with that as much.
Yeah.
And if I have a sticky shoulder and it feels bad and I just try and rush that warm-up stage, my body says no.
Yeah.
It's not happy.
Yeah.
So I have to go back, start the warm-up stage again. And if I do it properly, guess what? The pain goes away.
Right.
So that's not an injury. That's just that's an ache or a pain.
Okay.
And we all have aches and pains.
Right.
But if that doesn't sort it out, then it's not wise to continue.
Yeah.
You should change what you're doing. Does that answer
yeah,
the question?
amazing. No, that's super helpful. Okay, so that's the number one is don't get injured.
Don't get injured.
And is warm up within that?
Within that,
Okay,
yeah.
so
So your warm up
yeah.
is, part of that. That's
Right.
one of the biggest parts.
Okay.
The second thing is resistance training.
Yeah.
So this is absolutely key. And every single year that goes by, more and more research is coming out for the benefits of resistance training for every age group.
Yeah.
And I would say particularly for 40 plus.
Yeah.
And even when you get to 70, 80 years old, there's huge benefits to it.
Right.
So if I had one message to get out to people, it's that everyone should have some kind of resistance training practice if they can.
Right. Okay.